Now let's hear from John Tabacco. This is one of my favorite people at Newsmax. He hosts the Saturday night show Wise Guys at 10 o'clock at night, and he's just a fantastic personality. He's a Wall Street veteran. He knows a lot about the markets and trading, but he also knows an awful lot about politics, and he watches what's happening in world events. And my gosh, look at what's going on now. And thanks for coming on, John Tabacco. And one thing I was thinking, I was just checking on stock prices. In the first couple of days of this week, right after this tragic, terrible, shocking news of this barbaric attack, stocks were up like 3% in the first couple of days. How is Wall Street able to shake off terrorism and kind of focus on wherever it's going? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Nah, Dennis, times like this harken me back to one of my favorite television shows, Seinfeld, when they had the episode called Bizarro World. We have this situation here in America where the economy has been faltering for so long. We have our elected officials like the Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, and Jerome Powell telling us we're not in a recession. All this stuff is going to be okay. But they got to crush the interest rates just to try to get inflation under control. So, yeah, I think the world is upside down, literally, and the markets are upside down. There's no rational, reasonable explanation why the market should be up 1,000 when we're looking at, the global stage, potentially another war. We already have Ukraine and Russia at war. Now we're going to have Israel and Palestine in a formal war. And somehow or another, people out there think this is good for the markets. I don't know. Dennis, the markets look forward. They're a forward-looking vehicle. What the heck is Mr. Market looking at right now that says, hey, let's jump up 1,000 points? To me, I think it's a disaster. To me, I think it's a total disaster. I think retail investors may be getting sucked in right now thinking that this is going to be okay. But this is the calm before the storm, if you ask me, and I'd stay away from the market far.
Wow. I think the market might be, on one hand, is it saying, well, this conflict will be short-lived. Israel will go in there with overwhelming force, and this will be over soon. Or maybe the market's not even thinking about it. They were so happy that the Fed was, some members of the Fed were sounding a little more dovish. They paused just now. Maybe they're going to pause again. Maybe this risk point does more to kind of tamp down inflation and growth. Maybe the market's kind of looking at that.
No, I don't know. I don't know. And I've been in the markets for 30 years now. I don't know what Mr. Market is looking at. But what I do know is this. When you look forward, you look at the long yield on those bonds and you realize that it's totally out of whack. So the Fed, they got to walk a very fine line here, because every time they raise rates, then these regional banks who have all this old paper on their books at 2%, they got to remark that stuff. And then we start blowing up more banks. So the Fed's got to kind of keep the banking industry alive a little bit, but then also try to give a little opportunity for growth out there, because the commercial real estate market is going to get crushed shortly. So Powell's, he's dancing on a tightrope right now. But, I think very soon the London Bridge will fall, as they say.
Wow. So you're a true bear. Are you in your own personal account? Now, in a person's retirement account, they should leave it alone, right? They should not do anything. If your portfolio is balanced, if you're not overexposed, et cetera, don't be trading in and out and going wild here, right? You just go in for the long term. But if you're talking about someone who wants to put new money into the market now, you're questioning whether that's a wise move. Or am I wrong? Do you actually want to restack your entire retirement account?
All right. Well, first and foremost, I'm not an investment advisor, nor do I play one on TV. Right. Any investments that I make are solely for myself. I don't give out financial advice. But my background, Dennis, as you know, is in short selling. I think there are a lot more opportunities out there right now for sophisticated investors where shorting is kind of suitable for you. And to me, if you see a pack of young ladies, I would say you tend to be able to pick out the one you are least attracted to a lot easier than the one you're most attracted to. So yes. I'm out there looking for overvalued situations that stick out to me and say, this thing stinks and I think it's going down, rather than start jumping in potluck. And yeah, to the retail investor, you're invested for the right reason. You should be invested in 10-year intervals where your lifestyle changes. Sit back, namaste, stay calm. When the dust settles, there may be value opportunities out there for you. Then you look at it. Right now, stay calm.
You talk about short sellers. I've actually been doing a lot of research on short sellers lately because I'm writing a book on Elon Musk. This is something I haven't revealed to my listeners out there as yet. And I've just finished a chapter on short sellers. They are an odious breed. They bet on destruction. And yet the whole essence of capitalism, John, is that capitalism is optimism monetized. You invest somewhere because you have hope that it's going to go up. To bet on destruction, you've got a few billion-dollar winners like Bill Ackman and James Chanos, but they lost billions betting against Tesla, for example. And why not instead look for hope? Hope is a decision. And look at the shorts have been clobbered because we've had a bull market kind of coming back again and again for years. So please defend this odious breed of short seller for me.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I can unpack all the insults you threw at short sellers in such a short period of time. But let me peel back the onion and just say that short sellers take the most risk. They have unlimited risk. As you know, you can't predefine your downside unless you get even more sophisticated and start hedging with options. So you got to do the most homework. And I'll just say to you, for those of your viewers and listeners out there who know how to play the dice game, craps, if you see the guy down at the end of the table minding his business with the huge stack in front of him, he's usually playing the don't pass line. He's betting against the crowd and he's betting with the house. And I always liken short sellers. They don't stand there cheering and high-fiving each other. But what they do is if they've done their research correctly, they isolate those overvalued situations. And then they just sit back and relax. They don't start tweeting about it and everything else. They just collect the money. And, you're pointing out the Ackmans and the Chanos. You're saying they lost billions, but they're still two of the largest guys on earth. So
yeah,
I would say in the long run, they're doing okay, Danny.
Yeah, but Chanos in 2000 had $7 billion under management. He's down to $2 billion. He ended up pulling off his Tesla bet. And the other thing is, I like a Chanos type who does real research, depth, right? And by the way, James Chanos, in the early 80s, I'm covering Commodore Home Computer Company for the Wall Street Journal in New York. And Chanos had just ripped the lid off of Baldwin United, this company that they thought, and it crashed and cratered. And so James met with me and helped me pick apart the Commodore balance sheet to show that they were doing international intra-company fund transfers to mark up the cost and pay lower tax. And I went with that and ended up being involved in an insider trading case at the Journal in the 80s, okay? But so some people like Chanos, they do the research. But I think too often, too many shorts just fan the flames of rumors. They'll complain to the SEC about something, then they'll tell the press that the SEC is investigating. They'll, one accident with a Tesla, a full service driving, the auto drive, a woman breaks her ankle. It's national news. We have 2 million car accidents and 40,000 deaths and car accidents every year, but it becomes that in part because of what the short sellers do.
How about while you're filibustering me, how about when short sellers were the canary in the coal mine and told the whole world that Enron was a complete and utter fraud? I'll take you back all the way back to the heyday and Crazy Eddie. And that was exposed as a fraud. Why? Because short sellers start doing their homework and they realize these guys are selling boxes of rocks. And, while you're pot shotting one-off big-time short sellers, 33% of all the volume every single day in the markets is from short sellers. So there's a liquidity measure there that's important, where when stocks go up too far, short sellers are kind of used as a circuit breaker or a measure to take a look at it and say, whoa, wait a minute, this thing may be getting outside of its range. And they kind of keep the markets in check, if you ask me.
33% of the trading right now is short. Now, is that always around 33%, or is that double what it was 10 years ago? I mean, where is that? Is it always going
I
on?
would say historically it's been between 25 and 30. I would
Okay.
say that's right about where it's at.
Yeah. Right. I am hearing gathering storm clouds from a lot of places. There was we had a guest on What's Bugging Me talk about there's a 300, $400 billion shortfall in corporate tax collections looking forward. You've got various trouble signs. Do you think actually the economy will go into a full recession, and will the Fed let it? The Fed wants
Well,
it.
look, Dennis, let's do a little econ 101. Okay. People are talking about why is this accelerating so bad? What's happening? Go back to, in my view, the godfather of capitalism, Milton Friedman. He said inflation is simple. It's too many dollars chasing too few goods, right? So the Biden administration has run the magic printing press in the sky to a point where they have diluted the American dollar. So they've increased the supply of dollars. At the same time, one of the fundamental pieces of our economy that makes it go is oil and gas and petroleum. And what we've done in this country is we've limited the supply and access to our own oil and gas. So when you increase the dollars and then you decrease the supply output of oil, the oil cost, the shipping cost, the gas cost is an integral part of all this stuff. And our government is making too many dollars and not making enough oil. So it's exponential, the pain that's coming upon the people. And to me, it's pretty, it used to be supply and demand, but now it's supply and supply. They're supplying too many dollars. They're not supplying enough oil. So it's like, to me, it's an exponential beating, certainly to the middle and the lower class.
Yeah, and people feel that pulse point the most there at that gas pump and in the grocery store, and that's why I've been thinking, politically speaking, that the Fed can't afford to raise rates anymore. They're kind of done. I guess that's part of what Wall Street's betting right now, and they have raised them so fast and furiously in 18 months. Over borrowing costs on that federal funds rate up more than 20-fold. I mean, it's extraordinary. So they have a lot of ceiling, right? And they have a lot of room to cut. And we've talked on the show with some other guests about the Fed's kind of a political animal, and it cares who wins the election. And I think the Fed wants Biden to win the election. What do you think about that, John?
Well, that's been bugging me for a while, and I think going all the way back to Donald Trump, the chairman of the Treasury there, has been a political figure, which is scary. And I know Trump tried to bully him a little bit at one point, and I was against it because he's supposed to be independent. But I would just say, Dennis, that we're not getting the straight story across the board. On Wise Guys, I go out and talk to folks in the street every week, and I say, well, they're getting inflation down a bit, and it's like, 3-4% now. Does it feel a little better? And people say, no, man, we're at the gas pump, I'm getting crushed. My utility bills at home are like 40% higher than they were just 2 years ago. People are saying, I used to go for the sirloin steak. Now I go for the flank steak because my food is up like 15-20%. And those things aren't changing for people. So, there may be a whole bunch of government gymnastics. There may be a whole bunch of gobbledygook statistics from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics telling you things are getting better. But regular Joe and regular Jane are not feeling anything better. And they're looking at it like, why does the media keep telling me things are better? They're not.
And the other thing is, like, all the media are doing, because of what the White House is putting out, is they're focusing on that whip end, the tail end of the whip there out at the end. And, it's up or down from where it was. But the fact is, we've had a fundamental reset in price, the base price. It's up 10 or 15% everywhere. And it's never going to come back down. It's going to stay from there and either go up a lot or go up only a little, but it stays up there, right? And it didn't affect the economy at first for a year because there was so much money circulating around. We had so much in COVID aid, people getting paid to stay home, and savings actually went up to the highest levels in 10 or 20 years. I think I read somewhere during that time. And yeah, exactly. It's far more dollars chasing after, and not enough increase in the actual goods. And so the price of then, yeah.
Denny, this week, my Italian American heritage was on full display here in New York. We marched in the Columbus Day Parade, right up Fifth Avenue, and afterwards we went to a nice Italian restaurant right up there in Midtown New York. And I'm looking at the prices on the menu. We have four guys. We had four martinis. We had four bowls of pasta, and the bill was $250. And this is not an expensive place. This is a cafe, right? And I look at my friend, and my friend Arno, who lives in the Bronx, middle-class guy, and he says, wow, I thought inflation was coming down. How the heck is it $250 for lunch?
Right.
And I said to him, and this probably resonates with a lot of people in your audience, even when the prices come down, you think the restaurants are going to go out and print new menus and lower the prices? When you said this is the ratchet effect, this is ratcheted up. They're not going to go out and say, oh, you know what, that beautiful bowl of fettuccine bolognese is no longer $28. Now we're going to make it $22. No, a lot of this stuff is set and it sticks. And I'm not saying it's gouging, but companies had to react to inflation. But even when they get it under control, it's not going to pass back through to regular consumers.
Well, I so much appreciate your coming on, John. Thank you so much for being a friend of the show, and thanks for bringing me on Wise Guys on Newsmax, because it's a fun show. You guys ought to check it out there. 10 o'clock on Saturday nights, online, available on the Newsmax website. These guys are real characters. They get out there and talk to real people on the street, and you will definitely get insights that you will not hear from the mainstream fluffing media out there. And so I thank John for that. And John, you got anything else you want to dismount with and tell the listeners of what's bugging me?
Yeah, just to keep it topical, what's really bugging me is this guy Cenk Uygur from the Democratic Socialists of America, who's out there talking about how these people in Palestine are freedom fighters and militants. And Cenk and all your friends out there, call rapists, murderers, and people who behead innocent civilians, call them what they are, terrorists. They're not freedom fighters, and they're not militants.
In fact, I'm reading all of the New York Times' coverage, and I see the word terrorist only once, and that's when they say deep down in one of the stories, oh, by the way, the U.S. State Department has identified Hamas as a terrorist organization. The rest of the time, John, the New York Times is talking about militants. But I looked it up in the dictionary, and a militant is someone who has really ardent views, the dictionary says basically, whereas a terrorist is someone who brings terror and kills civilians and tortures and slaughters. And what Hamas did here is so unforgivable, and they deserve every bit of hellfire that Israel will rain down on them. But what bothers me and bugs me about this is that in New York and other cities in America, we have pro-Palestinian people, we have liberals, Americans, college kids who are celebrating these attacks and saying, well, Israel oppressed them for decades. This is deserved. It's not deserved when you go into civilians' homes and kill innocent civilians one by one. I can't even believe this. And John, they even took hostage an elderly Holocaust victim in a wheelchair. Can you imagine what this man who went through the Holocaust and Nazis rounding up the Jews, what it must have felt like for him when these Hamas terrorists came in? Well, I mean,
I wish Cenk Uygur and his mamacita, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, would call it like they see it and say, these are terrorists, because these aren't militants or freedom fighters. They're killing innocent women, children, and senior citizens for their political and religious ideology. And they don't wear any uniforms. They don't abide by any Geneva Convention, and they deserve to be treated like they are, terrorists.
John Tabacco, Wise Guys on Newsmax, Wall Street veteran. Thank you so much for coming on What's Bugging Me and sharing your views. I hope you have a glorious day, sir.
Thank you for having me, Denny.
Ricochet. Join the conversation.